Take what you can carry, Nate. This isn't your home anymore.
You really think this ends like this?
You didn't lose anything. You were robbed.
Then let's prove it.
Ownership is clear. No, that's not possible.
It was never yours.
Vanessa Collins stood in the doorway of the house Nate Carter had paid for with 14 years of quiet sacrifices, a champagne glass in her hand, and another man's arm wrapped around her waist. "You can pack what fits in your car," she said coldly, as two officers waited behind her. "This house isn't yours anymore." Nate didn't argue, he didn't beg. He didn't even look at the man smirking beside her. Because in his jacket pocket was the receipt proving the $500 million ticket she had just claimed had never been hers. And for the first time, Nate understood something she didn't. She hadn't won. She had stolen. Welcome to today's story. If you enjoy emotional drama and shocking twists, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more unforgettable stories. And before we begin, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. 3 days earlier, everything still looked like a normal marriage. Nate Carter sat at the small dining table in their narrow Philadelphia row house, red pen in hand, carefully marking through a stack of lesson plans. The hum of the old radiator filled the room. It had been doing that for years. Loud, stubborn, but reliable, just like him. He adjusted his glasses and made a small note in the margin, his handwriting neat and precise. Teaching wasn't glamorous. It never had been. But there was something about structure, about helping people understand things step by step, that grounded him. It made sense in a way the rest of life didn't always. Upstairs, the shower was running. Vanessa had come home late again. That had become normal too. Late nights, networking events, business dinners that stretched longer than they used to. At first, Nate had been proud of her. He still wanted to be. She had worked hard to move up in her field, always chasing something bigger, something better. But lately, something had shifted. It wasn't just the late nights, it was the tone. The way she looked at their home like it was temporary. The way she said things like, "We should be doing more with our lives," as if what they had wasn't enough anymore. Nate set his pen down for a moment and leaned back in his chair. He could still remember when this place had felt like everything. When they first moved in, they had celebrated with takeout on the floor because they didn't have furniture yet. Vanessa had laughed easily back then. Now, she barely noticed the table he had spent an entire weekend fixing. His eyes drifted toward the kitchen drawer. Every Thursday, without fail, he bought a lottery ticket. Same numbers, same routine. It wasn't about the money, not really. It was something steady, predictable, a quiet promise he made to himself that maybe one day things would shift. Not drastically, just enough. Enough to give Vanessa the life she kept hinting at. The water upstairs shut off. Nate picked up his pen again, but his focus had already slipped. A vibration buzzed across the table. Vanessa's phone. She had left it behind. That was new. She never left her phone. It buzzed again. Nate didn't look at it right away. He had never been that kind of husband. Trust had never been a question between them. But lately, trust had started to feel like something fragile, something he was holding alone. The screen lit up again. A name flashed across it. Gavin Mercer. Nate's fingers tightened slightly around the pen. He told himself to ignore it. He almost did. Then the screen lit up again. This time a message preview lingered long enough for him to read. "Soon we won't have to hide anymore." Something inside his chest shifted. Not sharply, not explosively. Just enough to change everything. He picked up the phone. The messages went back months. Photos, plans, conversations that were too familiar, too intimate, too calculated to be explained away. Nate didn't react the way most people would. He didn't throw the phone. He didn't storm upstairs. He read, carefully, quietly, the same way he graded papers. Looking for patterns, and he found them. Dates that lined up with business trips. Messages about money, about timing, about leaving. One line stayed with him longer than the others. He doesn't even realize what he has. He's so easy to walk past. Nate set the phone back exactly where it had been. Same angle, or same position. Footsteps came down the stairs. Vanessa appeared a moment later, wrapped in a silk robe that definitely hadn't come from their usual budget. Her hair was still damp, her expression calm. "Controlled? Still working?" she asked, her voice light but distant. "Just finishing up," Nate said. He studied her for a second longer than usual. She didn't notice, or didn't care. "How was the event?" he asked. "Fine," she said, brushing past him. "Met some interesting people. One developer from New York. Big projects. Gavin Mercer." "Sounds like progress." She smiled faintly, but it didn't reach her eyes, it is. That night Nate lay awake longer than usual, not because of the messages, not entirely, because something about them felt organized, or planned. This wasn't just an affair. This was something else. The next evening he stopped by Brooks Family Market on his way home. "Same numbers?" Samuel Brooks asked with a familiar grin. "Same numbers," Nate said. He paid, took the ticket, and slipped it into his wallet with the same quiet routine he had followed for years. At home, he placed it in the kitchen drawer like always. Vanessa didn't look up. Saturday morning came quietly. Nate made coffee, opened his laptop and pulled up the numbers. He checked once, then again, then a third time. Every number matched. His heart didn't race. Not at first, it just paused. Then everything rushed back at once. He stood up quickly, moving to the drawer. It was empty. The silence in the house felt different now. Nate didn't panic. He moved slowly, methodically, kitchen first, then living room, then upstairs. Vanessa's office door was slightly open. Inside, her desk sat perfectly organized, too organized. The lock drawer wasn't new, but the lock was. He knelt down and entered the code, their anniversary. It clicked open. The ticket was there, so were printed documents. Notes, appointment confirmations. A business card from Hawthorne Capital Advisors, with a time written in bold ink. Monday morning. Nate stared at everything for a long moment. Then he reached for his phone. He didn't take the ticket. He didn't confront her. He started taking pictures. Carefully, quietly. Because for the first time since he met Vanessa Collins, Nate Carter stopped trying to save his marriage and started preparing to prove that everything she believed about him was wrong. Nate didn't sleep that night. He lay on his side of the bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to Vanessa move around the house as if nothing had changed, as if she hadn't just rewritten 14 years of their life in a single afternoon. At some point after midnight, he heard her voice. Low, soft, on the phone. He didn't need to guess who it was. "Monday morning," she said. "Yes, everything is ready. I've already checked the process. It's clean. No complications." A pause, then a quiet laugh. "I told you he won't even know." Nate closed his eyes. He didn't move, didn't confront her, because now it wasn't about catching her in a lie. It was about proving one. By morning, he was already in the kitchen when Vanessa came downstairs. She looked composed, fresh. She had slept well, like she hadn't just spent the night planning how to erase him. "Coffee?" he asked, his voice steady. "Already had some," she said, scrolling through her phone. No hesitation, no guilt, just distance. Nate watched her for a moment, then reached for his own cup. "Did you check the numbers?" he asked casually. Vanessa didn't look up right away. That was the only pause. Small but real, then. She smiled faintly. "I did, nothing big, maybe $1 or $2. I didn't even keep the ticket." A lie delivered too smoothly. Nate nodded, like it didn't matter. "Figures." She shrugged. "You should really stop playing. It's kind of pointless. 14 years of habit, of hope, of something that had quietly belonged to him." He took a slow sip of coffee. "Maybe," he said. Vanessa leaned over, kissed his cheek like she always did. "Routine, muscle memory. Don't get your hopes up over things like that," she added, grabbing her bag. "I've got a showing today. Might be late." Nate watched her walk out the door without looking back. The house fell quiet again. This time, it didn't feel like home. It felt like evidence. He moved quickly after that, not frantically, not emotionally, just precisely. The receipt was still in his wallet. He laid it flat on the table, smoothing it out. The timestamp was clear. The location matched Brooks Family Market. He opened his banking app, found the transaction, screenshot, saved, backed up. Then he pulled out his laptop. For the next hour, Nate did something he had never imagined himself doing inside his own home. He built a case. 14 years of weekly purchases, every Thursday. Same store, same pattern. He didn't have all the records yet, but he had enough to start a timeline, enough to show consistency, enough to show ownership. Then he went upstairs. The office door was still slightly open. He stepped inside again, closing it gently behind him. The locked drawer sat exactly as it had the night before. He opened it carefully. The ticket was still there. So were the documents. This time, he paid closer attention. Printed instructions from the Keystone Lottery Commission. highlighted sections about claim procedures, identification requirements, payment options, a folder labeled distribution strategy. Inside it, notes, handwritten, Vanessa's lump sum versus annuity, tax implications, legal structuring, and something else. A second folder. Thinner. Nate opened it slowly, divorce paperwork, pre-filled, dates left blank, but everything else ready, property division, asset separation, legal language that positioned her as the primary claimant. His name was there, reduced to a signature line, or nothing more. Nate stared at the page longer than he expected. Not because he didn't understand it, but because of how carefully it had been prepared. This hadn't started yesterday. This had been building, quietly, deliberately. He reached for his phone again and took more photos. Every page, every note, every detail. Then he stopped. There was one more thing, a business card. Hawthorne Capital Advisors, a name he recognized, not personally, but professionally, high-end wealth management. Clients with serious assets. There was a time written in blue ink. Monday 9 a.m. Nate checked the clock. It was Saturday morning. He exhaled slowly. 2 days, that was her window. He returned everything exactly as he found it. Same alignment, same angle, same order. Closed the drawer, locked it. When he stepped back into the hall buzzed, an unknown number. He almost ignored it. Almost. But something about the timing made him pause. He answered, Mr. Carter? The voice was calm, professional, yes. This is Daniel Pierce. I'm calling on behalf of Hawthorne Capital Advisors. We've been trying to reach you regarding a prior authorization file connected to your name. It's time-sensitive. Nate's grip on the phone tightened slightly. I think you may have the wrong person, he said carefully. A brief pause on the other end. Papers shuffling. No, sir, the documentation is very clear. You are listed as the originating party on a financial instrument currently under review. We need confirmation before any transfer can proceed. Nate's eyes drifted toward the office door, toward the locked drawer inside, toward the ticket. I'm not available to discuss anything right now, he said. That's understandable, Daniel replied. But I strongly advise you not to delay. Once the claim is processed, without your verification, reversing it becomes significantly more complicated. The line went quiet for a second. Then the man added, lower this time. And based on what I'm seeing, Mr. Carter, you may already be running out of time. The call ended. Nate stood there in the hallway, phone still in his hand. For the first time since he found the ticket, the situation shifted. This wasn't just about proving Vanessa wrong anymore. It was about stopping something before it became irreversible. Nate didn't call Daniel Pierce back right away. He sat at the kitchen table, staring at his phone, replaying every word of the conversation. Once the claim is processed without your verification, that meant something. Not just legally, structurally. There was a step Vanessa didn't understand, and maybe hadn't even reached yet. He exhaled slowly, then stood up. Time mattered now. By mid-morning, Nate was in his car, parked half a block away from Brooks Family Market. He hadn't been back since Thursday. It felt different now, not like a routine stop, like a crime scene. He stepped inside. The familiar bell above the door rang softly. Samuel Brooks looked up from behind the counter, his face lighting up with the same easy warmth Nate had known for years. Nate Carter, he said, smiling. Thursday came and went without you stopping back. I was wondering, did you check those numbers yet? Nate forced a small smile. Yeah, I checked. Samuel leaned forward slightly, and Nate paused. Then he made a choice. Not the full truth, not yet. I think something's off, he said carefully. I need to confirm something about Thursday night, around 6:45. Samuel nodded immediately. You came in like always. Same numbers. We even talked about Jefferson Ridge's science fair. Nate's chest tightened slightly. The normalcy of that moment felt distant now. Do you still have the security footage? Samuel blinked once. Of course, I keep backups. Why? Nate hesitated just long enough to make it believable. I might need it. For verification. Samuel studied him more closely now. The smile faded, replaced by something sharper. Concern. You okay, Nate? I will be, he said. That was the closest thing to honesty he could offer. Samuel didn't push. Instead, he nodded and stepped into the back room. A minute later, he returned with a small USB drive. I pulled last Thursday's footage earlier this week for inventory timing, he said. Figured I'd archive it anyway. If you need it, it's yours. Nate took the drive. Thank you. Samuel leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. Whatever's going on, you've been coming here a long time. If someone's trying to say you didn't buy that ticket, they're wrong. Nate met his eyes. For the first time since all of this started, someone saw him clearly. That means more than you think, he said quietly. Back in his car, Nate plugged the drive into his laptop. The footage loaded slowly, then there he was. Thursday evening, 6:47 p.m., same routine, same numbers, same quiet exchange. Clear, undeniable. He watched himself on the screen, moving through a moment that had once been ordinary. Now it was everything. He copied the file, backed it up twice, saved it to the cloud. Then he pulled out his phone and dialed the number Daniel Pierce had used. It rang twice. "Mr. Carter," Daniel answered immediately. "I was hoping you'd call back." "I need to understand something," Nate said. "You mentioned verification. What exactly does that involve?" A pause. Not hesitation. Consideration. Normally, a claimant presents the ticket, identification, and signs the declaration. But for prizes of this size, especially when processed through advisory firms like Hawthorne Capital Advisors, there's often a secondary validation process tied to the origin of the ticket. Origin? Yes, purchase records, patterns, financial sourcing. It's not always required, but when there are discrepancies, it becomes critical. Nate leaned back in his seat. Discrepancies like what? Daniel's voice lowered slightly. Like a claim that doesn't align with known purchase behavior. Or when a third party is listed in preliminary documentation. Nate's fingers tightened around the phone. Was I listed? Another pause. Longer this time. "I can't disclose specifics without formal authorization," Daniel said. "But I can tell you this. The file attached to that ticket isn't as clean as your spouse probably believes." Spouse. The word landed differently now. "If the claim goes through Monday," Nate said, "what happens? Funds are released. Structuring begins. After that, unwinding it becomes significantly more complex. Not impossible, but expensive, time-consuming, and legally aggressive." Nate nodded, even though Daniel couldn't see him. "So I have one chance. You have one opportunity to intervene before it solidifies," Daniel corrected. "After that, you're not preventing a mistake. You're fighting one." The line went quiet for a moment. Then Daniel added, almost as an afterthought, "And Mr. Carter, if you are who I think you are in this file, you should not wait." The call ended. Nate sat there for a long time. Then he started the engine. He didn't go home right away. Instead, he drove to First Commonwealth Bank. Inside, the familiar teller greeted him politely. He asked to speak with a manager. A few minutes later, he was sitting in a small office, his laptop open, documents spread out. He didn't explain everything. Just enough. Purchase receipt, transaction record, pattern of behavior. The manager reviewed the documents carefully. "This establishes a strong purchase claim," she said finally. "But if the ticket has already been presented by another party—" "It has," Nate said. She nodded slowly. "Then you're looking at a dispute over ownership. That moves beyond the bank. You'll need legal representation, I figured." She hesitated, then added, "For something this size, you'll want someone experienced with high asset litigation." Nate closed his laptop. "I know." By the time he got home, the sun was already setting. Vanessa's car was in the driveway, lights on inside, voices. He stepped through the door quietly. Laughter drifted from the living room, not just hers. A man's voice, confident, familiar. Nate walked in. Vanessa was on the couch, a glass of wine in her hand. Gavin Mercer sat beside her, leaning back like he already belonged there. They didn't stop laughing when Nate entered. They just looked at him. Vanessa smiled faintly. "You're home early." Gavin's eyes moved over Nate once, dismissive, measuring. Nate set his keys down calmly, didn't realize we had company. Vanessa didn't flinch. "Gavin's staying for dinner." "Of course he was." Nate nodded once. "Good to know." He turned toward the kitchen. Behind him, Gavin chuckled quietly. "Man's got a routine," he said. "Respect that." Vanessa laughed. Nate didn't respond, but as he stood at the counter, his reflection in the darkened window caught his eye. Still calm, still steady, still underestimated. He reached into his pocket and felt the edge of the receipt. Then his phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown number. He opened it. A single line. "Claim appointment confirmed. Monday, 9 a.m. Keystone Lottery headquarters." Nate stared at the screen, then slowly he smiled. Vanessa didn't wait for morning. She didn't wait for anything. The next evening, Nate walked into the house and immediately felt it. The shift. The air was colder, tighter, like something had already been decided without him. Vanessa stood in the living room, not sitting this time. No wine, no laughter. Just stillness. Gavin Mercer leaned casually against the wall, arms crossed, watching Nate like he was waiting for a show. There were papers on the table, neatly stacked. Nate's eyes moved to them before Vanessa even spoke. "We need to talk," she said. Her tone was different now. Not pretending, not soft. Clean, final. Nate set his keys down slowly. "About what?" Vanessa gave a short, almost amused breath. "You really want to do this like that?" He didn't answer. She stepped forward, picked up the top document and held it out. Divorce papers. The word didn't echo. It landed. Flat heavy. "I've already filed," she added. "Irreconcilable differences." It's straightforward. Nate took the papers but didn't look down yet. He watched her. Instead, 14 years, and this was how she chose to end it. "When?" he asked. "This afternoon." "Of course, before Monday, before anything could slow her down." Gavin shifted slightly, a smirk tugging at his mouth. "No point dragging things out, right?" Nate finally glanced at him. Just once, measured, quiet. Then he looked back at Vanessa. "You've thought this through." "I have," she said, without hesitation. "And I'm being fair." That word again. Fair. She tapped the second page. "There's a settlement, 150,000. Cash, you sign, you walk away clean. No drawn-out legal mess. No drama." Nate let his eyes drop to the document now. Numbers, clauses, terms, language designed to erase him neatly. "This house transfers fully to me," Vanessa continued. "You waive any claim to future earnings, assets, everything tied to my situation, her situation." Nate's jaw tightened slightly, but his face stayed calm. "And if I don't sign?" Vanessa's expression didn't change. "Then you make this harder for yourself," she said. "I have resources now, Nate. Real ones. Lawyers who don't blink at long cases. I can drag this out for years if I want to." Gavin pushed off the wall, stepping closer. "You should take the deal," he said casually. "It's more than generous, considering." "Considering what?" Nate didn't ask. He already knew what they saw when they looked at him. A teacher, a routine, a small life, disposable. Vanessa softened her voice just slightly. "Not kindness, strategy. I'm not trying to hurt you," she said. "But we both know this marriage hasn't worked for a long time. I've moved on." Her hand drifted back toward Gavin, not touching, just close enough to say everything. Nate closed the folder. "Is that what this is?" he asked quietly. Moving on? Vanessa's eyes hardened for a split second. It's reality. Silence stretched between them. Nate placed the papers back on the table. "I'm not signing tonight." Gavin let out a low chuckle. "Of course not. He wants to think about it." Vanessa didn't laugh. She studied Nate more carefully now. Something about him wasn't lining up. No panic, no anger, just stillness. "You don't really have leverage here," she said. "You understand that, right?" Nate met her gaze. "Do you?" The question hung there. For a moment, something flickered across her face. Doubt, then it was gone. "I understand perfectly," she said, "which is why I'm giving you a way out." Nate nodded slowly. "I'll read everything." "That's fine," she replied, "but don't take too long." Things are moving quickly now. He picked up the folder and walked past them, heading toward the hallway. Behind him, Gavin's voice followed. "Man doesn't even realize when he's lost." Vanessa didn't respond. Nate didn't turn around. But his grip on the folder tightened just slightly. Inside the bedroom, he closed the door and finally exhaled. Not relief. Control. He set the divorce papers on the desk, next to his laptop, next to the receipt, next to the USB drive. 3 versions of the same truth. He opened the folder again. Read more carefully this time. Every clause, every assumption, every line built on the idea that Vanessa already owned everything, that the money was hers, that he had nothing to stand on. He reached for his phone, scrolled to Daniel Pierce's number, then stopped. Not yet. Instead, he opened his email, attached the receipt, the bank statement, the security footage, drafted a message, short, precise, requesting formal review of ownership documentation prior to claim processing. He hovered over the end button, then clicked. No undo now. His phone buzzed almost immediately. Not Daniel. Another number, unknown again. He opened it. "Legal notice received. Representation advised. Do not proceed alone." Nate stared at the message. Representation. That meant escalation. That meant Vanessa's side was already moving, faster than he thought. He looked down at the divorce papers again, at the signature line waiting for him, at the space where she expected him to give up quietly. He picked up a pen, turned it slowly between his fingers, then set it back down. Outside, he heard laughter again, Vanessa and Gavin comfortable, certain, unaware. Nate closed his laptop. His phone buzzed one more time. This time it was Daniel Pierce. A voicemail. Nate pressed play. "Mr. Carter, I received your documentation. You need to understand something immediately. If what you've sent is accurate, a brief pause. Then, lower sharper. They're about to commit a very expensive mistake. Nate didn't sleep much that night. He lay on the edge of the bed, fully dressed, staring at the ceiling while the quiet hum of the house pressed in around him. Every now and then, he heard movement from the living room. Vanessa and Gavin were still awake long after midnight, laughing, talking like the future already belonged to them, like he was already gone. By morning, Nate was up before the sun. He moved through the house quietly, methodically, not hiding. Just separating, he gathered what mattered, documents first. The receipt, bank records, copies of everything stored in multiple places. His laptop, his cloud drive, a second backup he transferred to an external drive and slipped into his jacket pocket. He paused in the kitchen for a moment. The drawer where he had kept the tickets for 14 years sat slightly open. He closed it gently. Then he left. He didn't tell Vanessa. He didn't need to. The drive into the city felt longer than usual. Traffic crawled, but Nate didn't rush. He checked the time once, then again. Still early, he parked 2 blocks away from the office building Daniel Pierce had mentioned. Hawthorne Capital Advisors occupied the top 3 floors, a quiet glass tower that didn't need to advertise what it handled. Money at that level didn't announce itself. It just moved. Inside, the lobby was polished and silent. A receptionist greeted him with practiced calm. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to see Daniel Pierce," Nate said. She glanced at her screen. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," he replied. "But he asked me to come." That wasn't entirely true, but it wasn't false either. She hesitated, then picked up the phone. Nate stood still, hands in his pockets, feeling the weight of the drive inside his jacket. After a moment, she nodded. "You can go up." Floor 32. The elevator ride was quiet. When the doors opened, a man was already waiting. Mid-40s, sharp suit, no smile, Daniel Pierce. "Mr. Carter," he said, extending a hand. "I'm glad you didn't wait." Nate shook it firm, steady. "You said it was urgent." Daniel gestured toward a glass-walled office. "It is." Inside, the atmosphere shifted. The door closed, the outside world faded. Daniel didn't sit right away. He walked to the window, looking out over the city for a moment before turning back. "I reviewed everything you sent," he said. "Receipt, transaction records, the footage." Nate nodded and... Daniel studied him carefully. "You are the purchaser," he said plainly. "There's no ambiguity there." The words landed quietly, but they carried weight. Not hope. Confirmation. But Daniel continued. "Your spouse has already initiated the claim process, and she's doing it through us." Nate's brow tightened slightly. "Through you?" Hawthorne Capital was engaged to structure the payout. Tax strategy, asset protection, distribution. "So you're representing her?" Daniel shook his head once. "We're representing the claim. That distinction matters." Nate didn't respond. Daniel stepped closer. "Right now, everything is moving based on the assumption that she is the rightful owner. That assumption hasn't been challenged formally. Until now." Daniel's gaze sharpened. "Until now." He moved to the desk and pulled out a folder. "Here's where it gets complicated. She didn't just show up with the ticket. She came prepared. Documentation, statements, a narrative that fits cleanly on the surface." Nate's jaw tightened because she planned it. Daniel didn't disagree. "But planning doesn't make it legitimate," he said. "It just makes it harder to unwind." Nate leaned forward slightly. "What happens Monday?" Daniel opened the folder. "Monday is the final verification and authorization stage. Once that's completed, funds are released into structured accounts." After that, he paused. "You're no longer preventing a transfer. You're litigating recovery." Nate let that sink in. "How do I stop it?" Daniel held his gaze. "You don't stop it alone." The words were simple. Nate straightened slightly. "I need legal representation," he said. "Yes," Daniel replied. "Someone who understands high-value disputes. Fraud, asset tracing. Someone who won't be intimidated by what your spouse now thinks she has." Nate thought of Vanessa. Of the way she stood in the living room, holding those papers like they were already final, like he had already lost. "Do you have someone in mind?" Nate asked. Daniel nodded once. "Victoria Lawson." The name meant nothing to Nate, but the way Daniel said it... She doesn't take every case," Daniel added. "But if she sees what I've seen," he slid the folder across the desk. "She'll understand exactly what's at stake." Nate looked down at it. "Didn't open it yet?" "Why are you helping me?" he asked quietly. Daniel didn't hesitate. "Because this isn't just a financial dispute," he said. "It's a misrepresentation of ownership at a level that carries legal risk for everyone involved." including us. That made sense. More importantly, it felt real. Set the meeting, he said. Daniel studied him for a moment longer, then gave a small, approving nod. I already did. Nate looked up. What? Daniel checked his watch. She's expecting you. Not panic, not fear. Momentum. When? Daniel met his eyes now. Victoria Lawson did not stand when Nate walked in. She didn't need to. Her presence filled the room in a way that made everything else feel secondary. The office wasn't flashy. Clean lines, dark wood, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Power without noise. She looked up from the file already open on her desk. You're late, she said. Nate glanced at the clock on the wall. He was exactly on time. I came as fast as I could. She held his gaze for a second longer than necessary, testing, measuring. Then she nodded once. Sit. Nate took the chair across from her. The folder on her desk was open to the first page, his receipt, his bank record, the still frame from the security footage. She tapped the page lightly. You've been playing the same numbers for 14 years. It wasn't a question. Yes. Family dates. Yes. Victoria leaned back slightly. And your wife knew that. Nate didn't answer right away. She did, he said finally. Victoria's eyes sharpened. That makes this easier. Nate frowned slightly, she said. This isn't a dispute over a lost ticket. This is premeditated appropriation. The words were precise, controlled. But there was something underneath them. Momentum. Victoria closed the file and folded her hands. Here's what you're facing, she continued. Your wife has already positioned herself as the claimant. She's engaged Hawthorne, Capital. She's likely secured preliminary tax, structuring, and asset channels. From the outside, it looks clean. It's not. No, Victoria agreed calmly. But appearances matter in the early stages, especially when money is involved at this scale. Nate leaned forward slightly. Can we stop the claim? Victoria's expression didn't change. Not outright, she said. Not without triggering immediate legal resistance from her side, and from anyone financially tied to that claim. So what do we do? Victoria didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached for another document, this one thicker. Before we talk strategy, she said, I need to know something. Nate waited. Why didn't you confront her the moment you found the ticket? The question was simple. The answer wasn't. Nate exhaled slowly. Because I needed to know how far she was willing to go. Victoria watched him closely. And now you do. Yes. She nodded once. Good. She slid the second document across the desk. Because this isn't just about proving ownership. It's about controlling the timing of the reveal. Nate glanced down at the file. Didn't open it yet. Victoria leaned forward slightly now. If we move too early, she adjusts, she pivots. She creates a narrative that drags this into a long, expensive fight, and if we wait. Victoria's voice dropped just a fraction. We let her commit fully. Nate looked up. Commit to what? To the lie, Victoria said, to the fraud, to the public version of events she won't be able to walk back from. The room went quiet. Nate felt something shift inside him. Not anger, not fear, clarity. Victoria tapped the folder again. You've already done something most people don't, she said. You didn't react emotionally, you documented, you preserved evidence. That gives us leverage. Nate nodded slowly. So what's the plan? Victoria opened the second file. Inside were printed screenshots, financial summaries, preliminary claim structures. How familiar are you with large asset litigation, she asked. I'm not, Nate admitted. She said, you don't need to be. You just need to understand one thing. She turned the file toward him. At this level, money doesn't move instantly. It moves through approvals, verifications, layers of legal oversight. Nate studied the documents. He didn't recognize everything, but he recognized enough. Monday is the final authorization, he said quietly. Victoria's eyes flickered with interest. Daniel told you. Yes, she nodded. Good. Then you understand the window we're working with. Nate looked back up. What happens if she gets the money? Victoria didn't hesitate. Then we take it back. The confidence in her voice wasn't arrogance. It was certainty, but it came with weight, time, cost, damage. Slowly, I'd rather stop it before that. Victoria studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded once. Then we make Monday count. She closed the file and stood. For now you go home, she said. You don't confront her. You don't change your behavior. You let her believe exactly what she already believes. That I don't know. That you can't fight, Victoria corrected. Nate's jaw tightened slightly. She noticed. Control that, she said, but only if you use it correctly. Nate stood as well, and you? He asked. Victoria picked up her phone. I prepare. He nodded once, then turned toward the door. Mr. Carter, she called after him. He stopped. Monday morning, she said, you don't walk in as a husband. Nate turned slightly. You walk in as the owner. The words settled into him as he left. Not loud, not dramatic, just real. Back outside, the city felt different. Sharper. Nate got into his car and sat there for a moment, hands resting on the wheel. For the first time since this started, the path in front of him wasn't just reaction. It was direction. His phone buzzed again. A new message. This time from Vanessa. Make sure you're home tonight. We need to finalize things. Nate stared at the screen. Finalize. He typed a short reply. I'll be there. Then he started the engine. As he pulled into the driveway later that evening, the front door was already open. Lights on. Voices inside. More than one. He stepped in. Vanessa stood in the living room again. But this time she wasn't alone. Two men in suits stood beside her. Lawyers. Gavin was there too, watching with same quiet confidence. Vanessa turned as Nate entered. This won't take long, she said. I've decided not to wait anymore. One of the lawyers stepped forward, holding out a new set of documents. Mr. Carter, we're here to formalize an agreement regarding immediate possession of the property. Nate didn't take the papers. He looked at Vanessa instead. Her eyes were calm. Certain. Unaware. We're doing this tonight, she said. And behind her, one of the men reached into his briefcase and pulled out something else. A court order. The paper didn't look dramatic. No bold letters, no flashing warnings. Just a clean header and a judge's signature at the bottom. But the moment Nate's eyes scanned the first paragraph, the air in the room shifted. Temporary exclusive possession, the lawyer said, almost casually. Pending final proceedings. Vanessa crossed her arms, watching him closely. This just makes things simpler, she added. For everyone. Nate kept his eyes on the document. The language was careful, strategic. Claims about emotional instability, about potential conflict, about her need for security given new financial circumstances. Every line crafted to paint him as the problem. He looked up slowly. You filed this yesterday. Vanessa didn't flinch. Of course I did. Gavin let out a quiet breath, like he was enjoying the moment more than he should. You really thought this would just stay messy, he said. There are smarter ways to handle things. Nate ignored him. He looked at Vanessa. This is what you wanted. It's what makes sense, she corrected. You can't stay here, not after everything. After everything, Nate repeated. The words sat between them, heavy, distorted. The lawyer stepped forward again, holding out a pen now. If you sign the agreement tonight, Mr. Carter, we can avoid further complications. You'll have a clean exit, immediate compensation. No drawn-out process. What kind of compensation, he asked. Vanessa answered before the lawyer could. $150,000. She said cash, immediate transfer. Gavin smiled faintly. That's generous, he added, considering. Nate let the silence stretch. 14 years, reduced to a number she thought would make him disappear. I'm not signing anything tonight, he said. Vanessa's expression hardened. Then you're making this harder than it needs to be. Maybe, Nate said quietly. The lawyer shifted tone slightly. Mr. Carter, refusing to cooperate may escalate matters. This order allows us to enforce removal if necessary. Nate folded the document and handed it back. I understand what it allows, he said. And he did, better than they expected. Vanessa studied him again, something flickering in her eyes. Confusion, not fear, not yet. You're not even going to argue? She asked. Nate met her gaze. No, that unsettled her more than shouting would have. Gavin stepped forward now, just enough to claim space. You should take the deal, he said. Start over somewhere smaller, more appropriate. Nate finally looked at him. For the first time since he walked in, there was no anger in his eyes, just something colder. You think this is about starting over, Nate said. Gavin shrugged, isn't it? Nate didn't answer, because explaining it would give them something they didn't deserve. Understanding, Vanessa exhaled sharply. Fine, she said. Don't sign. It doesn't change what's happening. She turned to the lawyer. Proceed. The man nodded once. Two uniformed officers stepped forward from the doorway Nate hadn't even noticed before. They had been waiting prepared. Mr. Carter, one of them said, his tone professional but not unkind. We need you to begin gathering your belongings. The words landed exactly as intended. Final, public, humiliating. Vanessa stepped aside, creating a clear path toward the hallway. Take what fits in your car, she said. The rest can be sorted later. Nate stood still for a moment. Not frozen, just choosing. Then he nodded once. Okay. He walked past them without another word, up the stairs, into the bedroom that still smelled like her perfume, like everything they had built together. He didn't rush, didn't slam drawers, didn't throw things into bags. He packed methodically, clothes, documents, the few items that actually mattered, his laptop, the folder he had already prepared, the receipt, every piece of evidence. He checked it twice before placing it carefully into his bag. Downstairs, voices drifted faintly. Vanessa, Gavin, laughter muted but there. He paused for a second, not because it hurt more, because it didn't anymore. That was the part that surprised him. When he came back down, the officers were still waiting. Vanessa leaned it against the counter, sipping from a glass. Gavin stood beside her like he belonged there, like this had always been his place. Nate set his bag near the door. That's it? Vanessa asked. For now. She nodded. Good. No apology, no hesitation, just confirmation. The officer stepped forward again. We'll escort you out, he said. Nate picked up his bag, walked past them, through the doorway, into the night air that felt colder than it should have. Behind him, the door closed. Not slammed, just shut, like a chapter being erased. He stood there for a moment, looking at the house. Then he walked to his car, put the bag in the back seat, sat behind the wheel, and finally let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. His phone buzzed, unknown number. He almost ignored it, then answered. Mr. Carter? The voice was calm, professional. Yes, this is Daniel Pierce. Nate straightened slightly. I was given your name by Victoria Lawson. Right, Nate said. I've already started looking into your situation, Daniel continued, and there's something you need to hear before tomorrow. Nate's grip tightened on the steering wheel. I'm listening. A brief pause on the other end. Your wife didn't just plan this after the win, Daniel said. She's been preparing for months. Nate closed his eyes for a second. Not surprised, but hearing it confirmed. It's worse than that, Daniel added. Nate opened his eyes again. How much worse? Another pause. Then quietly, she didn't just wait for the right moment to take the ticket. A beat. She was waiting for you to win. Nate didn't start the engine right away. The phone call lingered in the silence of the car, heavier than anything Vanessa had said to him that night. She was waiting for you to win. The words replayed again. Not a mistake. Not desperation, a plan. Nate finally exhaled slowly, then spoke into the phone.
What exactly did you find?
Daniels didn't rush. Patterns, he said, and preparation, the kind that doesn't happen overnight. Nate leaned back in his seat, staring at the dark outline of the house that used to be his. Tell me. There's a separate bank account, Daniel said, opened about 7 months ago, not connected to any of your shared finances. Small transfers at first. 200, 300 at a time. Enough to build a reserve without raising suspicion. Nate closed his eyes briefly. 7 months. That lined up too neatly, with everything he had started to feel. The distance, the late night, the tone in her voice when she talked about his job. She was planning to leave, Nate said quietly. Yes, Daniel replied, but not empty-handed. Nate's grip tightened on the steering wheel again. What about Gavin? A pause. Then a soft breath on the other end. He's worse than she is, Daniel said, at least in terms of intent. Nate opened his eyes. How? He didn't stumble into her life, Daniel continued. I pulled his records. Financial trouble. A lot of it. Failed developments, outstanding loans, legal pressure from investors. He needed money fast. Nate felt something cold settle in his chest, and he found her. He targeted her, Daniel corrected. Looked into her work, her social circles, her habits. He knew she was dissatisfied, that she wanted more, that she felt stuck. Nate let out a slow breath. She told me they met at a networking event. They did, Daniel said. But it wasn't random. He knew she'd be there. Positioned himself. The picture sharpened in Nate's mind. Every conversation Vanessa had repeated. Every time she mentioned how Gavin understood her, how he saw her potential. It hadn't been connection, it had been calculation. And the messages? Nate asked. I accessed a backup, Daniel said. Cloud storage. He wasn't careful. Nate's pulse ticked up slightly. What do they show? Silence for a second. Then Daniel spoke slower now. 4 months ago, she wrote to him. He's predictable. Same numbers every week. If those stupid tickets ever hit big. Nate didn't move, didn't react. But something inside him shifted. Not pain, not shock. Something steadier, something harder. There's more, Daniel added. Nate swallowed once. Go on. 1 week before the draw, Daniel said, she mapped it out. Said the tickets were always in the same place. Said you check every Saturday morning. Her exact words were, if we ever win, I'll take it before he even knows. The silence in the car stretched again. This time it didn't feel empty. It felt clear. Every doubt Nate had left dissolved right there. This wasn't betrayal in the moment. This was strategy. Long-term. Deliberate. He opened his eyes again and looked at the house. Vanessa's silhouette moved behind the curtain for a second, then disappeared. She thought I'd never fight back, Nate said quietly. Daniel didn't answer immediately. When he did, his tone was measured. She thought you wouldn't know. Nate nodded once. Even though Daniel couldn't see it, that was the real mistake. Not the theft, not the affair, the assumption that he would stay small, that he would stay quiet, that he would accept whatever version of the story she gave him. What do we do next? Nate asked. We move fast, Daniel said, before she locks everything down further, before the money gets too spread out. And legally? You'll need someone strong, Daniel replied. Someone who knows how to handle high-value disputes and fraud cases. Nate thought of the name Victoria Lawson. He had heard it once before, from a colleague who had gone through a brutal divorce. She's expensive, Nate said. Yes, Daniel replied simply. Nate looked down at his hands, at the calluses from years of routine, of showing up, of doing the right thing quietly. Then he looked back at the house, at the life Vanessa had just tried to erase him from. I'll make the call, Nate said. Good, Daniel replied. And Nate? Yeah, don't confront her again. Not yet, let her believe everything is under control. Nate almost smiled. She already does. Then keep it that way, Daniel said. The line went quiet, the call ended. Nate set the phone down slowly. For a moment he just sat there. Then he reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out the folded receipt. He opened it carefully. The numbers were still there, clear, undeniable. Proof of something she thought she had already rewritten. He placed it back into the folder with the rest of the documents, closed it, then finally started the engine. The car hummed to life, soft and steady. Just like everything else he had built over the years. Quiet, consistent, undervalued, until it wasn't. As he pulled away from the curb, his phone buzzed again. A new message, unknown number. He glanced at it briefly at the red light. One line, direct. Mr. Carter, this is Victoria Lawson. I've reviewed the preliminary details. If you're serious about recovering what's yours, we need to meet first thing tomorrow. Nate stared at the message for a second longer, then typed back one word. Yes. The office of Victoria Lawson didn't try to impress anyone. No glass walls, no skyline view. Just a quiet, controlled space where nothing was accidental. Nate noticed that immediately. The woman behind the desk looked up as he stepped in, her eyes sharp, assessing. You're on time, she said. It wasn't praise, it was a test. Nate nodded once. I didn't want to waste yours. A slight shift in her expression. Approval, maybe. Good, Victoria said. Because I don't take chases like this unless the facts are worth the fight. She gestured to the chair across from her. Sit, show me what you have. Nate didn't hesitate. He opened the folder carefully, laying everything out in order. The receipt, the timestamps, the photos he had taken from Vanessa's drawer, the notes about claim procedures. Victoria didn't interrupt. She read, slowly, methodically. Every now and then she would mark something with a pen, circle a detail, underline a date. When she reached the printed notes Vanessa had written, her eyes paused for a fraction longer. Then she looked up. Did she know you had this? No, Nate said. Did you confront her? I asked about the ticket. She said it was worthless. Victoria leaned back slightly. And you let her keep talking, yes? A faint smile touched her lips. Good, she said. That tells me something important. What? Nate asked. You're not emotional about this, she replied. You're disciplined. Nate didn't answer. He wasn't sure that was entirely true. But he had learned something in the last few days. Emotion didn't help him here. Precision did. Victoria tapped the receipt with her pen. This is your foundation, she said, proof of purchase. In Pennsylvania, that matters more than possession if fraud is involved. Nate leaned forward slightly. So she doesn't automatically own it? No, Victoria said. She assumed she did. That's her first mistake. She slid the photos of the ticket in Vanessa's drawer closer to the center. This is your second advantage, she continued. Intent. Nate watched her carefully. She didn't just find the ticket, Victoria said. She planned to take it. These notes, the timing, the conceals intent, this isn't a misunderstanding. This is premeditated. Nate exhaled slowly. Hearing it framed like that made it real in a different way. Legal, structured, unavoidable. What about the fact she already claimed it? He asked. Victoria's expression didn't, she said. But it doesn't end them. She stood, walking over to a whiteboard behind her desk. With quick, clean strokes, she wrote 3 words: fraud, conversion, unjust enrichment. These are the pillars, she said. We prove she took property that wasn't hers, lied to claim it, and benefited from that lie. Nate watched the words. They felt colder than the reality, but more powerful. And the money? He asked. We move to freeze what's left, Victoria said. Or immediately. Before it disappears into assets, accounts, or other people's hands. Nate thought of Gavin, of the way he had stood there like he belonged in Nate's house. He's already spending it, Nate said. Victoria nodded once. Then we move faster. She turned back to him. This will not be quick, she added, and it will not be clean. She has access to serious money now. That means serious lawyers. They will try to discredit you, delay you, pressure you. Nate met her gaze. I'm not backing down. Victoria held his eyes for a moment longer, then nodded. I believe you, she said. She returned to her desk and sat down again. I'll take the case, she continued. Contingency basis. 25% of whatever we recover. Nate didn't flinch. That's fair. Victoria tilted her head slightly. You didn't even negotiate. I don't need to, Nate said. Another pause, another small shift in her expression. Respect this time. All right, she said. Then we start today. She reached for her phone and dialed quickly. Daniel, I need everything you have organized and sent over within the hour, she said. We're filing immediately, a beat. And Daniel, if there's anything else, anything at all, I want it before they know we're coming. She ended the call and looked back at Nate. Now she said, tell me about the pattern. Nate frowned slightly. What pattern? Your lottery purchases, she clarified. You've been doing this a long time. 14 years, Nate said. Same numbers? Yes, why? Nate hesitated for a second. Family dates, birthdays, anniversaries. Victoria nodded slowly. That's good, she said. Nate blinked. Good. It establishes consistency, she explained. Routine, ownership behavior. That matters in court. Nate leaned back slightly, absorbing that. Every small, quiet habit he had built over the years, now part of the case. Part of the proof that he existed, that he mattered. Victoria gathered the documents into a clean stack. We're going to file 3 things today, she said. A civil suit, a challenge with the Keystone Lottery Commission, and an emergency motion to restrict access to the funds. Nate nodded slowly, and if she fights it? Victoria gave a short, humorless smile. She will, she said. And she'll think she's winning at first. Nate didn't ask why. He could already see it, Vanessa in that house. Spending, celebrating, believing the story she had built. What about Gavin? Nate asked quietly. Victoria's eyes flicked back to him. He's a variable, she said. People like him don't stay loyal when money gets complicated. Nate thought about that, about the look in Gavin's eyes the night before. Not love, not even loyalty, opportunity. Victoria tapped the table lightly. We don't need him yet, she continued. But we will. Nate's what do I do now? Victoria met his gaze one last time. You stay exactly who she thinks you are, she said. Quiet, predictable, out of the way. A beat, and you let her build a life she can't keep. Nate nodded once, then turned to leave. His phone buzzed just as his hand touched the door handle. He glanced down. A notification, a public post, Vanessa's account. He hesitated, then opened it. A photo filled the screen. Vanessa, Gavin beside her, champagne in hand, standing in what used to be his living room. The caption was short. New life, new beginning. Nate stared at it for a long second. Then another notification appeared beneath it. A tagged comment. Gavin, only the beginning. Bigger things coming soon. Nate's jaw tightened slightly. He locked the phone, slipped it into his pocket, and walked out of the office without another word. The coffee shop was quiet enough that Nate could hear the soft clink of ceramic against wood every time someone set down a cup. Vanessa sat across from him, both hands wrapped around her coffee like it was the only steady thing left in her life. She looked different, not just because the designer clothes were gone, because the certainty was gone. I didn't think you'd come, she said, her voice lower than he remembered. Nate shrugged slightly. You asked. A long pause followed. She studied him, like she was trying to find the version of him she used to understand. I know what the court said, she began. I know the money was yours. I know I was wrong. Nate didn't interrupt. She hesitated, her fingers tightening around the cup. I don't understand why you pushed it this far. You could have taken a settlement. You could have walked away with something and been done. Nate leaned back slightly, watching her carefully. This was never about getting something, he said. Vanessa frowned faintly, then Then what was it about? He didn't answer immediately. For a moment, he just let the silence sit between them. You didn't just take money, Nate said finally. You decided I didn't matter, or that I was small enough to erase. Her eyes dropped. You lied, he continued, not just to the state, to me every day. You planned it, you waited for it. I made a mistake, she said quickly, almost too quickly. Nate shook his head once. No, he said, you made a decision that landed differently. He could see it in the way her shoulders stiffened. I thought, she started, then stopped. Thought what? Nate asked. That you'd just accept it, she admitted. Or that you wouldn't fight back. Nate let out a quiet breath. That's the part you got wrong. Vanessa looked up again, eyes searching. I didn't fight because of the money, Nate said. Or I fought because of what you tried to make me believe about myself. She didn't speak. You wanted me to think I was replaceable, he continued. That I didn't have a voice. That I should be grateful for whatever you decided to leave me. Or Nate leaned forward slightly, his tone calm but firm. I wasn't going to live with that. Vanessa blinked quickly, her composure slipping again. I didn't realize, she whispered. You didn't want to, Nate said. That was the truth she had avoided the entire time. Not ignorance, convenience. I lost everything, she said after a moment. Because that wasn't entirely true. She hadn't lost everything. She had lost what she thought mattered. The money, the house, Gavin, she trailed off. Nate's expression didn't change. You lost what you built on a lie, he said. Another silence, this one heavier, final. Vanessa nodded slowly, like the weight of it had finally settled. I know you won't forgive me, she said. Nate met her gaze. I'm not holding on to your anger, he replied. That's not the same as letting you back in. She swallowed, understanding the difference. For the first time, she wasn't trying to argue. Take care of yourself, Vanessa, he added quietly. He stood before she could respond. Didn't wait for another question. Didn't give her another chance to rewrite what had already been said. As he walked out of the coffee shop, the air outside felt lighter. Not because everything was perfect, but because it was his again. The following months didn't turn into a spectacle. No grand announcements, no public revenge. Nate paid what needed to be paid, closed what needed to be closed. He invested the rest carefully, the same way he had lived his life before all of this, steady or intentional without noise. He didn't buy a mansion, didn't chase the life Vanessa had wanted. Instead, he chose something quieter, a home that felt like his, work that still meant something, and the space to decide who he wanted to be without anyone else measuring his worth. The money didn't change him, but it gave him something he hadn't had before, control, not over others, over his own life. Sometimes, late at night, he would think about how close he had come to losing everything, not just financially, but personally. Not because he didn't have value, but because someone else decided he didn't. And that was the part that stayed with him. Not the betrayal itself, but the assumption behind it that he wouldn't fight, that he didn't matter enough to. He proved otherwise. Quietly, completely, and without ever needing to become someone else to do it. If you've ever been underestimated or made to feel small, maybe you understand why that mattered more than anything money could ever buy. Let me know your thoughts, and stay with me for the next story.